That night, I saw my husband secretly leave the house, dragging a very large black suitcase. I followed him. He went to the old bridge near the river and threw the suitcase into the raging water. Just before the suitcase sank, I pulled it back to the riverbank. My hands trembled as I opened the zipper. What did I see inside? But before the story begins, please write in the comments where you're watching this story from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can continue to grow and present even more interesting stories. Claire woke up not because of an alarm or the morning sunlight, but because of the silence. A silence that felt unnatural, too thick, as if it were holding its breath. The air in the bedroom felt sharp against her skin. Claire blinked, adjusting her vision to the darkness that was only faintly pierced by the street light filtering through the gap in the curtains. She turned to the side. Daniel's side of the bed, her husband's, was empty. The sheets there were cold when she touched them with her palm. That meant Daniel hadn't just gone to the bathroom. He had been gone for quite some time. Claire's heart began to beat a little faster. Where would Daniel go at 3 a.m? Daniel was a man of routine. He was an accountant at a large company. His life revolved around numbers and schedules. Leaving in the middle of the night without telling Claire was not something he normally did. Claire sat up. She was just about to reach for her phone on the nightstand when a faint sound came from downstairs. A soft click, like the front door had just been closed. After that, silence. Claire held her breath. Was that Daniel coming home? But if he had just returned, why was his side of the bed already cold? Curiosity mixed with anxiety pushed Claire to get up. She didn't turn on the light. Her feet stepped softly on the cold wooden floor as she left the bedroom. She grabbed a shawl hanging on the door handle, threw it over her shoulders, and quietly went down the stairs. Their house was large, and the silence made it feel even wider, even emptier. She reached the dark living room. Her heart felt like it dropped into her chest. Through the large window facing the driveway, Claire saw him. Daniel. He was standing near our car parked in the garage, but he wasn't trying to get into the car. Beside him, under the dim yellow light of the Darden lamp, stood a suitcase. Not an ordinary suitcase. It was a very large black suitcase, a hard cargo-type suitcase that looked extremely heavy. Daniel wasn't wearing pajamas. He was dressed in a dark jacket and long pants, as if he were about to go somewhere. Claire froze behind the curtain, her eyes fixed on her husband. Daniel looked nervous. He glanced left and right, making sure the street was empty. Then he bent down and lifted the suitcase. The muscles in his back visibly tensed. The suitcase was clearly very heavy. He didn't put it into the car. Instead, he began to drag it. The wheels of the suitcase squeaked softly against the paving blocks of the driveway. Daniel did not head towards the front gate. He headed toward the side gate, a small gate that led to a narrow footpath behind their housing complex. The footpath was a shortcut to the park area and a small river at the edge of the neighborhood. Why was Daniel carrying such a heavy suitcase to the river? Claire's thoughts raced. Was he leaving me? Was he taking valuables with him? But then, why throw it into the river? Claire couldn't just stand there and watch. She had to know. Moving quickly and silently, Claire rushed to the back door. She opened the latch as carefully as possible, almost without a sound. The cold night air immediately hit her face. She slipped on her flip-flops and stepped outside. She had to keep her distance. She couldn't let him notice her. Claire moved through the shadows of the trees that bordered the backyards of the houses. Daniel was about 50 meters ahead of her. The moonlight wasn't very bright, helping her remain hidden. She could hear the squeaking of the suitcase wheels on the rocky footpath. Each squeak sounded like a scratch against her eardrums. "What are you doing, Daniel? What are you hiding from me?" During their 5 years of marriage, Daniel had been a good husband, maybe a little stiff and quiet, but attentive. Claire had never had a reason to doubt him. Until tonight. The footpath sloped downward toward the riverbank. There stood an old wooden bridge that was rarely used anymore. The current beneath it was quite strong, especially after the heavy rain over the past few days. Claire watched as Daniel stopped right in the middle of the bridge. He set the suitcase down and bent over, bracing his hands on his knees as he struggled to catch his breath. He was clearly exhausted. Claire hid behind thick bushes, only a few meters from the base of the bridge. She could see her husband's back clearly. Daniel stood upright. He stared down at the dark water below. He remained still for almost a full minute. Claire felt as if time had stopped. Then Daniel turned to face the suitcase. He didn't open it. He just stared at it. Suddenly, in one swift movement, Daniel crouched down. He positioned the suitcase at the edge of the bridge. He was preparing to push it. At that very moment, Claire heard something. The sound was muffled by the thick material of the suitcase, but Claire was certain she had heard it. A noise like something shifting inside, or perhaps a faint, suppressed groan coming from within the suitcase. Claire's heart stopped. Was there something alive in there? An animal? Or... She didn't dare to finish the thought. Daniel must have heard it too, because he flinched slightly, but he didn't hesitate. With a strong shove, Daniel pushed the large black suitcase off the bridge. The suitcase fell. Claire watched it disappear into the darkness. A second later, a loud splash shattered the silence of the night. Water sprayed high into the air. The suitcase sank immediately, dragged down by its own weight and the strong current. Daniel didn't leave right away. He stood there, in the middle of the bridge, staring at the spot where the suitcase had vanished. His hands were clenched at his sides. He stood like a statue for several minutes. Claire couldn't see his expression from behind. What was he thinking? Regret? Relief? Then Daniel turned and walked back. His steps were fast now, no longer dragging anything. He went back along the same footpath, heading toward the house. He didn't even look back. Claire stayed hidden behind the bushes. She was trembling. Her entire body shook violently, whether from the cold or from fear she didn't know. She waited until Daniel's footsteps completely faded away. Then she waited another 5 minutes, making sure he wouldn't return. She was alone. There was only the sound of the rushing river and the pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears. That sound, the groan from inside the suitcase, kept echoing in her mind. She had to see. She couldn't leave it like that. She ran to the riverbank. Her eyes searched wildly across the dark surface of the water. The current was strong. The suitcase must have been carried far away. But then she saw it. At a slight bend in the river, about 20 meters from the bridge, something was stuck. The suitcase was wedged between a pile of rocks and the roots of a large fallen tree. It hadn't sunk completely. A small portion of its surface was still visible. Claire made a decision in a split second. She no longer cared about the mud or freezing water. She moved along the slippery, muddy riverbank, gripping tree roots to keep from slipping. The river water felt ice cold as it soaked the hem of her pajama pants. She reached the spot where the suitcase was stuck. She grabbed the handle. It was incredibly heavy. The water made it even heavier. She pulled with all her strength. Her small body trembled with the effort. She pulled and kept pulling. Inch by inch, the mud sucked at her sandals, but she didn't care. After a struggle that felt endless, the suitcase finally rested on the muddy riverbank. Claire collapsed beside it, sitting heavily on the ground, gasping for air. She was soaked, filthy and terrified. The suitcase lay in front of her like a stranded dark monster. The groaning sound was gone now. Maybe it had only been her imagination. Maybe it was just the sound of objects shifting inside. But she had to know. She had to open it. With trembling hands, she felt along the surface of the suitcase, searching for the zipper. She found it. The metal zipper pull felt ice cold against her fingers. She gripped it tightly. Claire took a deep breath, gathering what little courage she had left. She glanced once more toward the footpath, making sure Daniel was truly gone. Silence. Just her and this horrible secret. Slowly, she began to pull the zipper. The sound of it was unbearably loud in the quiet night, like tearing open something that was never meant to be opened. The zipper snagged slightly on the mud, but Claire forced it open. As the suitcase parted, the smell of river water mixed with something else, something sweet and rotten. Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. When she saw what was inside, her heart seemed to stop instantly. What she saw made her shake with terror. It wasn't a corpse. Claire almost wished it were a corpse. If it had been a body, the explanation might have been simpler. Murder, something horrible but still understandable. But this was something else, something far more disturbing and confusing. Inside the suitcase were dolls. Dozens of antique porcelain dolls were neatly arranged inside the velvet-lined compartment. They wore beautiful little dresses with curled hair and glass eyes that stared blankly into the night sky. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Every doll's face had been defaced. Someone had taken red paint, perhaps nail polish or oil paint, and smeared it across their porcelain faces. Rough red lines slashed over their eyes, across their stiff, smiling mouths, as if someone had tried to blind them or silence them. Nausea rose in Claire's throat. It was a vision straight out of a nightmare, enough to make her scream. But that wasn't what made her heart truly stop. Around the neck of each doll hung a simple string necklace, and from every necklace dangled a small laminated photograph. Photographs of her. Claire's heart didn't stop. It exploded in pure terror. They were photographs of her, taken without her knowledge. There was a photo of her sleeping in their bedroom, her face peaceful and unaware. There was a photo of her shopping at the market, wearing her blue shawl, laughing. Another showed her watering plants in the backyard. And the most terrifying one of all, a blurred photograph taken through the bathroom window, showing her silhouette while she was showering. Claire staggered backward. She tripped over a tree root and fell hard into the mud. She couldn't breathe. This was the collection of a stalker. Years' worth of it. The photos were taken at different times. She could tell from her clothing and the way she wore her shawl. Someone had been watching her with a sick obsession. And her husband, Daniel, had just thrown this horrifying collection into the river. Why? Was Daniel the one who took these photos? Was Daniel the one who vandalized the dolls? But Daniel was her husband. They slept in the same bed. The thought made her stomach churn violently. She forced herself to look back into the suitcase. Beneath the layer of dolls, there was more. In a hidden compartment, she saw stacks of cash, neatly bundled banknotes soaked through with river water. The amount had to be enormous. What kind of money was this? Where did it come from? Beside the cash lay a small black leather notebook. It too was wet. Claire knew she didn't have much time. Daniel might realize she wasn't in bed. Someone might see her by the river. She had to act fast. She couldn't leave this here. If Daniel had thrown it away, it meant he wanted it gone. Claire, on the other hand, needed answers. She had to hide the suitcase. She couldn't take it back to the house. No, Daniel would find it. Her mind raced to the old storage shed behind the park, a small wooden shed where they kept gardening tools and old belongings. It was rarely opened, and she had the key on the kitchen key hook. It was a safe place. With the last of her strength, Claire pulled the zipper closed. She no longer cared about the mud or the water. She began dragging the suitcase away from the river toward the shed. She avoided the main footpath, pushing through thicker bushes instead. The suitcase was unimaginably heavy, as if all the secrets inside carried real weight. When she reached the shed, her hands were shaking so badly she struggled to fit the key into the padlock. The lock was rusted and opened with a piercing screech. She pulled open the creaking wooden door. Inside, it was dark and smelled of dust. She shoved the suitcase in, hiding it behind stacks of old fertilizer sacks and tarps. She would check it again tomorrow, after sunrise, when her mind was clearer. But there was one thing she couldn't leave behind: the notebook. She reached back into the suitcase, her fingers brushing against cold porcelain as she grabbed the wet notebook and slipped it into the pocket of her pajama pants. She locked the shed again. Then she ran back to the house, moving like a thief. In the backyard, she used the garden hose to rinse the mud from her feet and sandals as quickly as possible. She dried herself with an old towel. She slipped in through the back door, locked it, and quietly went upstairs. Every step on the stairs felt unbearably heavy. When she reached the top, the kitchen light was on. Her heart jumped into her throat. Daniel was standing there, in front of the refrigerator, wearing only a t-shirt and pajama pants, holding a glass of water. He turned when he heard Claire. His face was calm, completely calm, as if he had simply woken up to get a drink. "Claire," he said, his voice slightly hoarse from sleep. "Why are you not asleep yet, sweetheart? Why are you downstairs?" Claire gripped the stair railing. She tried to steady her breathing. She had to act normal. Her life might depend on it. "I was thirsty." Her voice trembled. She cleared her throat. "I came down to get some water. I didn't see you in bed. I thought you were in the bathroom." Daniel smiled. It was the smile he always wore, a small, slightly tired smile. "I woke up too, couldn't fall back asleep. Maybe too much coffee at the office this afternoon." He walked toward Claire and placed his free hand gently on her cheek. His hand was warm. "Are you cold? You look so pale." Claire had to fight the urge to pull away from his touch. This hand, the same hand that had just pushed that horrifying suitcase into the river. I was just startled," lied Claire. "Come on," Daniel said softly. "Let's go back to bed." Daniel nodded, turned off the kitchen light, and they walked upstairs together. Claire let Daniel walk ahead of her. She stared at her husband's back, the same back she had seen on the bridge. Was this man the stalker, or was he hiding the suitcase for someone else? If he was the stalker, why throw away the trophies? If he wasn't, then who was? And why was Daniel involved? They returned to bed. Daniel lay down immediately and closed his eyes, or at least pretended to. Claire lay with her back to him, her body stiff as wood. She couldn't sleep. She would never be able to sleep beside this man again without knowing the truth. She waited. She listened to Daniel's breathing slowly become steady and deep. 1 hour. She waited a full hour, making sure Daniel was truly asleep. The notebook in her pocket felt heavy and damp. Moving as slowly as possible to avoid making any sound, Claire slipped out of bed. She took her phone and the notebook into the bathroom. She locked the door as quietly as she could and turned on the dim bathroom light. She sat down on the cold floor. Her hands trembled as she opened the leather-covered notebook. The pages were wet, and the ink had slightly bled, but most of it was still readable. It wasn't a diary. It was a list. On the first page were rows of names, women's names. Next to each name was an address. Beside the address were numbers that looked like sums of money. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Her heart pounded violently. She turned the page. More names, more addresses. She didn't recognize most of them. Then she reached the last written page. There was only one name, a name she knew, a name that made the blood in her veins turn to ice. The name was Laura, her best friend. Laura, who had died a year ago. The official cause of death? A single-car accident, brake failure on a downhill road. A terrible tragedy. But here, in this notebook, beside Laura's name, an address was written. And next to it, the number 500. And beside that number was a single word written in red ink. Finished. Claire sat on the cold bathroom floor, staring at the name in the notebook. Laura, her best friend. The word finished, written in red ink, seemed to scream at her, mocking every ounce of grief she had ever felt over that accident. Brake failure. That was what the police had said, a tragic, unintended accident. But this book said otherwise. This book said Laura's death was a transaction, something paid for, something completed. Claire's heart pounded so violently it hurt, as if it were trying to break out of her chest. She thought of Laura, her bright laughter, her kindness, and then she thought of Daniel, her husband, sleeping in the next room. The same man she had held just hours ago, the same man who might be involved in her best friend's murder. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the notebook. She forced herself to focus. If Laura was one of the names, what about the others? She didn't recognize most of them, but a terrible feeling crawled up her spine, the same instinct that had driven her to follow Daniel to the river. This wasn't a single incident. This was a pattern. The suitcase wasn't just a container. It was a secret grave. The dolls were the victims. This notebook was the record. And the photographs, her photographs, hanging around the dolls' necks, what did that mean? Was she the next target? Had Daniel stalked her, then fallen in love with her? Or had their entire relationship been part of this sick game from the very beginning? She had to know. But she couldn't do it here. She couldn't use her laptop or her phone. If Daniel was involved, he wouldn't be careless. He would know how to track digital traces. Carefully, Claire dried the notebook page by page using Daniel's hairdryer, set to the lowest heat. She had to preserve the evidence. Once it was dry enough that the ink wouldn't bleed anymore, she wrapped it in a small plastic bag taken from her cosmetics trash and hid it inside a brand new box of sanitary pads beneath the sink. No one would ever look there. She cleaned the bathroom thoroughly, making sure not a single trace of mud or river water remained. She turned off the light and returned to the bedroom. Daniel was still asleep, or pretending to be. His breathing was steady. Claire lay down at the very edge of the bed, as far away from her husband as possible, her back turned to him. She closed her eyes, but all she could see were the ruined doll faces and the word finished, written in red ink. She didn't sleep for a single second. She waited for dawn. She needed air. She needed answers. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, Claire was already dressed and composed. "Where are you going so early?" Daniel asked, drying his hair with a towel. I'm going to a study gathering at Mrs. Aisha's house," Claire lied. It was a believable lie. She often attended religious gatherings in the neighborhood. "Maybe I'll stop by the market, too." "Oh, all right," Daniel said, walking to the closet to get his work clothes. "Do you want me to drive you?" "No need," Claire answered too quickly. She took a breath. "No need, dear. I can order a ride. You need to get ready for work anyway." Daniel looked at her for a moment. Claire felt as if she were under a microscope. "Are you sure? You look a little pale, sweetheart. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Claire said, forcing a smile. "Just didn't sleep very well. I woke up last night and couldn't fall back asleep." "Yeah, me too," Daniel said casually. "Maybe we should cut down on coffee." He smiled again. The same smile that used to calm her, now it made her blood run cold. Claire didn't order an online ride. She walked out of the housing complex, making sure no one was following her. Her heart pounded at every corner. She didn't go to the market. She took a public minibus into the city center, to a crowded area where she could blend in. She went to an old internet cafe on the second floor of a row of shops. The place was noisy and stuffy, a place where no one would pay attention to her. She paid for 1 hour in the farthest corner booth. She sat in front of a computer with a dusty screen. Her hands trembled as she typed on the sticky keyboard. She didn't open the notebook. She had memorized the first 3 names from the front page. The first name? Karen Davis. She typed it into the search engine. The result appeared instantly. A local news article from a year ago. Young entrepreneur found dead in her apartment. Claire read the article with shallow breaths. Karen Davis, 28, a successful boutique owner, was found dead by her housekeeper. The official cause of death, gas poisoning due to a leak from the water heater in her bathroom. Police concluded there were no signs of foul play, a pure accident. Next to her name in the notebook was the number 300. Claire's heart sunk. She typed the second name, Bella Williams. Another article, 9 months ago. Tragedy on her birthday night, young heiress falls from her balcony. Bella Williams, 25, had just inherited a vast fortune from her father. She fell from the balcony of her 20th floor apartment during her own birthday party. Witnesses said she appeared drunk and unstable. Police ruled it an accident caused by negligence. The number beside her name was 450. Claire felt nauseous. This was no coincidence. She typed the third name, Renee Hall. 6 months ago, a single vehicle accident claims the life of an interior designer. Renee Hall, 30, her car veered off the road late at night on a quiet highway and crashed into a barrier. Brake failure. The same as Laura. Exactly the same as Laura. The number beside her name was 350. Claire leaned back in her chair, shaking. The cramped room felt like it was spinning. All the victims were women, all young, all wealthy, and all their deaths were ruled accidents. She didn't need to check the remaining names. She already knew what she would find. This was a kill list. Daniel, her husband, was involved in a contract killing syndicate. The money in the suitcase, it was blood money, payments for these lives. And the dolls, now she understood. The dolls were trophies, 1 doll for each life. Daniel, or whoever he worked for, was a psychopath who collected dolls from their victims. The damaged faces, perhaps that was their signature. a mark that the job was done. But then there was a part that didn't make sense. The photographs. Her photographs. Photos of Claire. Why were her photos there, among the victims? Why would Daniel stalk her if she was just a target? And if she was a target, why marry her? Why was she still alive? Why did Daniel throw the suitcase away? Was he panicking, trying to erase evidence? Or was he trying to protect her? The thought surfaced out of nowhere, but Claire immediately pushed it away. Protect her? A man who kept a list of deaths? Impossible. She stared at the screen, her mind at a dead end. What was she supposed to do? Go to the police? What would she even say? My husband is a contract killer. The proof is in a notebook I took from a suitcase he dumped into a river. They would think she was insane. She needed more. She needed something concrete. Her 1-hour session was almost up. Claire began closing all the browser windows, deleting her search history. She had to get home before Daniel became suspicious. That was when she saw it. An email notification on her phone lying beside her. She hadn't used it, but she had forgotten to turn off her mobile data. The email was from an unknown sender. The address was just a string of random letters and numbers. The subject line read, "You forgot something, Claire." Her heart stopped. How did they know her name? With trembling hands, she opened the email. There was only one thing inside. A photograph. A new one, high resolution. It showed a porcelain doll she had never seen before. The doll was sitting on a wooden chair in a dark room. Its face was intact, beautiful. And the doll was wearing a shawl. A dark blue shawl. The exact same one Claire was wearing at that very moment inside the internet cafe booth. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't possible. She looked around the booth. No cameras. She looked out the window. Just a busy street. Then a second email arrived. Timestamp. Now. Subject line. Don't turn around. Claire froze. She couldn't move. Pure fear paralyzed her. Whoever this was, it wasn't just Daniel. It was them. And they didn't just know what she was doing. They knew where she was. They were watching her. At that moment, panic felt like too small a word. This was pure terror flooding her nervous system. Don't turn around. The command echoed in her head. She didn't dare. She stared at the screen. The message was proof. They were here, nearby, watching her from across the street, from a car. Or was there a hidden camera inside this internet cafe? She felt filthy, exposed, like an insect under a magnifying glass. She had to leave, now. With stiff movements, she forced herself to close the email. She didn't delete it. She needed that proof. She turned off her mobile data. She stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. She walked to the cashier, paid the remaining time without making eye contact, and went down the stairs. Every step felt heavy. She didn't dare turn around. She didn't dare look back. The moment she reached the crowded street, she gasped for air. The hot afternoon air felt suffocating. She blended into the crowd, walking fast. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had to get rid of the shawl. This dark blue shawl was now a target on her back. She spotted a street vendor across the road, selling clothes and shawls. She rushed over, nearly bumping into several people. "Miss, black instant shawl," she said hurriedly, her voice barely coming out. She handed over the money, grabbed the shawl, and didn't even wait for change. She ran into a narrow alley between two shops, looking for a public restroom or prayer room. She found a small prayer room. In the women's ablution area, she quickly changed her shawl. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm herself. She stared at her reflection in a small, cracked mirror. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wild. She took the dark blue shawl, crushed it in her hands, and threw it into a trash bin outside. She felt slightly safer, but she knew it was an illusion. They knew her face. She couldn't go home. Not yet. But she also couldn't go anywhere else. Daniel would be suspicious if she disappeared, and they might follow her. Home. Ironically, it might be both the most dangerous and the only place where she could find more answers. She had to go back. But she had to be smarter. She had to wear a mask, just like Daniel. She took another minibus, choosing a winding route, switching vehicles several times, just to make sure no one was following her. Finally, after nearly an hour of circling, she arrived back at her housing complex. She walked through the gate. Every step felt like breaking glass. The house looked the same. Green lawn, flowers blooming in the garden. Normal. Too normal. She opened the front door. Silence. "Daniel?" she called toward the study. "Sweetheart," Daniel answered. His voice sounded cheerful. Her heart eased just a little. At least she knew where he was. She walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Her hands were still trembling. She had to act normal. She had to play her role. She walked toward the study. The door was slightly open. Daniel was sitting at his desk, facing the computer, wearing a headset. He was clearly in the middle of a video call. He glanced at Claire, smiled, and gave a small wave before turning his attention back to the screen. Claire leaned against the doorframe. There he was, her husband, an accountant by day, and by night, a killer, a cleaner, or perhaps just a pawn. She watched Daniel speak enthusiastically into his microphone, discussing numbers and financial projections. He was very good at this, very good at wearing his mask, just as good as he was at being a caring husband, the man who would make her ginger tea when she caught a cold, the man who would massage her feet after a long, exhausting day. How could the same man be a monster who dumped a suitcase full of dolls, victims, into a river? Daniel finished his call and removed his headset. "Hey," he said, turning in his chair. "That was quick. I thought your study gathering would last until the afternoon." The exact question Claire had anticipated. She already had her answer prepared. "I suddenly got very dizzy," Claire said, rubbing her temples. "Mas." The act felt real because she truly was dizzy, from fear, from lack of sleep. "So I decided to come home." Daniel stood up immediately. His face showed genuine concern, or at least it looked genuine. He stepped closer and placed the back of his hand against Claire's forehead. "You don't have a fever," he said, "but you do look pale. Then, why did you change your shawl? This morning it was blue." The question hit Claire like a punch. He knew. Of course he knew. He noticed everything. Claire swallowed hard. "Oh, on the minibus, a child threw up and it splashed onto my shawl," she said quickly. "So I bought a new one at the market." The lie slipped out effortlessly. She was surprised by how easy it was. Daniel nodded slowly. His eyes lingered on her as if searching for something. "All right then, you should rest in the bedroom. Do you want me to make you some tea?" "No, Mas, I just want to sleep." "Okay, I still have one more call. After that, I'll finish my work." He smiled, his husband's smile. Claire went to the bedroom. She didn't sleep. She lay stiff on the bed, listening to the sound of Daniel talking again in his study. This conference call sounded longer. This was her chance. She couldn't just lie there and wait. She had to find something, anything she could use, something that could explain her photographs. She got up and returned to Daniel's study. The door was now closed but not locked. She opened it very slowly. Daniel wasn't there. She heard his voice downstairs in the kitchen, probably getting a drink. Her heart raced. She only had a few minutes. She looked around the study. This room was Daniel's territory. She rarely came in here. Everything was neatly arranged. Bookshelves filled with accounting and finance books. Nothing suspicious. She checked the drawers. Locked, of course. She glanced at the computer. Password protected, of course. Frustration washed over her. She wasn't going to find anything. Her time was almost up. As she was about to turn away, her eyes fell on a painting on the wall. A simple landscape of rice fields, something Daniel had bought years ago. Something about it felt wrong. The frame was slightly loose on one side. She slid it aside. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a small digital safe. Claire stared at the gray metal box. This was it. This was where Daniel kept his real secrets. She touched the keypad. It needed a code. What was the code? She tried Daniel's birthday. Failed. Her birthday. Failed. Their wedding date? Failed. She heard footsteps on the stairs. Daniel was coming back. Panic surged. Claire forced herself to think fast. What date mattered? What date would he hide? Her mind snapped back to the internet cafe, to the list of names, to Laura. The date of Laura's accident. She remembered it clearly from the news article. February 14th, last year. The suitcase. From the direction of the river to our warehouse. Daniel stared at Claire. His voice was low and dangerous, almost a hiss. You should have left it at the bottom of the river. Claire's blood froze in her veins. The footage of herself was clearly visible under the neighbor's dim security light, struggling with the black suitcase. Daniel wasn't just suspicious. He knew. He knew everything. The passports lay scattered across the floor at her feet, evidence of betrayal that now felt laughable compared to the video in Daniel's hand. His calm, icy voice was far more terrifying than if he had been shouting, "You should have left it at the bottom of the river." Claire couldn't speak. Her throat was locked. All she could do was stare into Daniel's eyes. Eyes that had once always looked at her with warmth. Now they were cold as ice. The mask was completely gone, and Claire no longer knew who or what was standing in front of her. Daniel let out a long breath, the breath of someone exhausted by complications. He lowered the phone and slipped it into his pocket, along with Claire's phone. He took one step into the study. Claire instinctively stepped back, bumping into the desk behind her. Daniel didn't touch her. He simply bent down and closed the study door behind him. The click of the lock turning sounded like a death sentence. "Sit down, Claire," he said. It wasn't a request. Claire didn't move. "Sit down," Daniel snapped. This time, Claire flinched and immediately dropped into the guest chair in front of his desk. Daniel stood before her, tall. He looked down at his wife, and Claire saw something new in his eyes. Not just anger, but also a trace of panic, barely visible. "You don't know," he said quietly, his voice trembling with restrained emotion. "You have no idea what you've done." Claire tried to speak, but her voice came out as a rasp. "I saw the notebook, Daniel. Laura. You killed Laura?" "I didn't kill anyone," Daniel shouted back, his face flushing. "I'm an accountant. I clean numbers, I move assets, I fix problems." "Mrs. Karen? Lily? Rihanna?" Claire shot back, her courage born from desperation. "They were all problems?" "They were accidents, coincidences. Daniel said sharply. He turned away. He walked to the window, staring out at their peaceful garden. "This was never supposed to be your business," he said. "It was my job. I handled it." "They were paid to do it." "Paid?" Claire echoed. "Daniel, they're dead." "And that had nothing to do with you," Daniel snapped, turning back to her. "Until last night, until you decided to play hero and take the suitcase." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. The exhaustion was real. "Claire," he said, "I was ordered to get rid of that suitcase, erase it from existence. My boss wanted every trace cleaned. The job was finished. Nothing was supposed to remain. It was a direct order." "Your boss?" Claire repeated. "Yes, my boss. Someone far bigger and far more dangerous than you can imagine. Someone who doesn't tolerate mistakes. Someone who doesn't like their property being stolen." "Property?" Claire whispered. "That notebook, the money and the dolls, all of it belonged to him. The trophies," he added, "they were his, not mine." Claire's thoughts spun. "So you weren't stalking me? The photographs?" Daniel laughed, but the sound was dry and bitter. "Stalking you? Claire, I fell in love with you. I saw you in that cafe years ago, long before any of this. I was the one who approached you. Marrying you," he said quietly, "was the only real thing I've ever done." He paused. For a moment, his expression softened. "But my boss, he knows everything. When he found out I was going to marry you, he became interested in you. He ordered me to collect your photos. I didn't know why. I thought it was just his sick obsession until I saw a new doll being prepared. A doll with your photograph. That was why I had to act." Claire stared at him. "Act? By throwing it into the river?" "It was the safest way," Daniel said defensively. "My boss ordered all the old trophies destroyed. He said he was cleaning house. He gave me that suitcase filled with all the old victims' dolls and ordered me to sink it in the sea. But he also put the new doll inside. The doll with your photograph. That was the signal. His way of telling me that you were the next target." Claire's stomach twisted painfully. "So you threw it away to protect me?" "I thought so," Daniel said, pacing back and forth in the small room. "I thought if I disposed of everything exactly as ordered, he would be satisfied, that he would move on to another target. But you took it back. You took the suitcase, Claire. You took the notebook." "How did you know I took the notebook?" Claire asked. "Because the notebook is the most important thing in that suitcase," Daniel snapped. "And now my boss knows the suitcase didn't sink. He knows it's missing, and he's blaming me." "How could he know?" whispered Claire. Her mind flashed back to the horrifying email at the internet cafe. "Because they're everywhere," Daniel shouted, now fully panicked. "They're watching me. They're watching you. The email you received this morning, the doll wearing your blue shawl." "You thought that was me?" he said bitterly. "No, that was them. That was my boss telling me I failed, telling me he knows you're involved." A fresh wave of terror washed over Claire. So Daniel hadn't known either. He had been just as shocked as she was. They were both targets now. "Where's my phone?" Claire asked. Her hand instinctively searched the pocket of her long dress. Empty. "In my pocket," Daniel said, "along with your car keys and the house keys. You are not going anywhere." "We're trapped here." "What, Daniel?" Claire said desperately. "We have to leave. We have to go to the police." "The police?" Daniel laughed. The sound was almost unhinged. "Claire, don't you understand? This boss, he's untouchable. He's respected. He has connections everywhere. If we go to the police, we'll be dead before we finish the report. They'll call it a failed robbery or a gas leak accident, just like the others." Daniel stopped pacing. He stood still by the door, listening to the silence of the house. "The notebook," he said quietly, "is our only chance to survive. My boss wants it back. That's the only reason we're still alive right now. He thinks I have it, and he's waiting for me to return it." Daniel turned to Claire, his eyes narrowing. "So tell me, Claire, where did you hide it? Where did you hide the notebook?" Claire stared at her husband. This man was a killer, or at least an accomplice to one. He had lied to her for years, and yet, strangely, he might also be the only person who had ever tried to protect her. And right now, he was just as afraid as she was. "They're coming," Daniel whispered. His eyes were fixed on the front window, as if he could already see something moving in the approaching darkness. "They'll come for the notebook, and they'll kill both of us to clean up this mess. You should have left it at the bottom of the river, Claire." The silence in the study grew thick and suffocating. Claire could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, competing with Daniel's heavy, uneven breathing. The man standing before her was no longer her husband. He was a panicked stranger, an accomplice trapped in his own game. But he was right. They were trapped together. The word police died in Claire's throat. If what Daniel said was true, the police weren't saviors. They were a shortcut to the grave. Claire had to think, not as a betrayed wife, but as a survivor. She had one thing Daniel didn't, one thing the boss wanted more than anything else. "I'm not telling you where the notebook is," Claire said. Her own voice surprised her, calm, steady. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Claire, this is not the time to play games." "I'm not playing," Claire replied. She stood up, squaring her shoulders, even though she still had to look slightly upward to meet his gaze. "Your life depends on that notebook, and that means your life depends on me. I won't give up my only weapon until you tell me everything. No more lies. Who is this boss?" Daniel stared at her for a long moment. He searched her face for hesitation, for fear. He probably saw the fear, but he also saw resolve. He knew she wouldn't back down. Finally, he exhaled in defeat. He walked to his desk and collapsed into his chair, covering his face. When he lowered them, he looked 10 years older. "You won't believe me," he said quietly. "Try me," Claire said. Daniel looked straight into her eyes. Mrs. Hartini. The name hung in the air. Claire frowned. "Mrs. Hartini? The philanthropist? The woman who runs the Mother's Care orphanage? No, she's a saint. Everyone in this city respects her." "That's exactly why she's perfect," Daniel said bitterly. Who would ever suspect a kind old woman who had devoted her life to orphaned children? She was the perfect mastermind, hiding in plain sight. Claire sank back into her chair. Her mind couldn't process it. Mrs. Hartini. She had met her several times at charity events organized by Daniel's company. A gentle woman, always smiling, radiating warmth and kindness. "How?" Claire whispered. "How could she Why? Money, Daniel said. Of course. But it's more than that. It's about control. The orphanage is her farm. She doesn't just raise children, Claire. She invests in them. Daniel spoke quietly, methodically. Mrs. Hartini is brilliant and ruthless. She selects the smartest, most promising children from her orphanage. She gives them the best education, sends them to elite schools, uses her vast charity network to secure connections. She helps them land powerful jobs or makes sure they marry into wealthy families. She makes them feel indebted to her for life. Daniel swallowed. She becomes their mother, the only family they've ever known. And they'll do anything for her. Anything, Claire said softly. Daniel avoided her gaze. Yes, including me. I was one of her first successful investments. I was good with numbers. She saw that. She paid for my education, put me through accounting school. She got me my first job at a major firm. I owed her everything. And what did she ask in return? At first, just donations to the orphanage. Then she asked me to help manage the finances of some of her other foster children, to oversee their inheritances. That's when I realized the money wasn't being managed. It was being siphoned, redirected back to her foundation through a complex web of shell companies. Back to her. And if they refused, Daniel's expression darkened. That's when I understood my job wasn't just accounting anymore. I became a problem solver. The children who started to suspect something, who asked too many questions, they became problems. Like Laura? Claire whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes. Laura was from the orphanage too. She was like a sister to me. She married a wealthy man who later died of a heart attack. Laura inherited everything. Mrs. Hartini expected her share. Laura refused. She said she would expose her. So Mrs. Hartini ordered me to handle the problem. You sabotaged her car, Claire whispered. Horror flooded her. I didn't touch the car, Daniel said quickly, defensively. My role was financial. I manipulated the service records, paid a mechanic to ignore worn brake pads. I arranged her insurance in a very specific way. I cleaned the digital and financial trails. I didn't kill her, Claire. I just built the stage. The dolls, Claire remembered. The suitcase. That's her hobby, Daniel said with disgust. She likes to preserve her favorite children. She commissions custom porcelain dolls for every successful investment when they come back to her, when she reclaims their wealth, when they die. She damages the doll's face, marks it as hers, forever. It's her ritual. Sick, cold, precise, a neatly organized horror. So, Claire tried to connect everything. She knew you married me. She knew I wasn't from the orphanage, but she still made me a target. I don't know why, Daniel said honestly. I thought she was just paranoid. She doesn't like variables she can't control. You were that variable. She told me to watch you, to collect your photos. I thought it was just to make sure I wouldn't talk. But then she prepared a doll for you, and that's when I knew you weren't just a variable. You were on her list. Claire fell silent. Her eyes drifted to the passports scattered on the floor. One of them, hers. Her photo. A different name. The passport, she said, pointing. The fake one for me. Sarah Wijayanti. Why that name? Daniel picked it up, studying it as if seeing it for the first time. That was my insurance. If anything went wrong, I planned to take you and disappear, start a new life somewhere far away from her. But why that name? Claire pressed. Why Sarah Wijayanti? Daniel frowned, searching his memory. I don't know. It was a name Mrs. Hartini gave me years ago, long before I ever met you. She said, Daniel, if you ever need an emergency identity for a woman, use this name, memorize it. I never knew why, I just used it for that passport. Claire froze. Her heart pounded, but not with fear, with something colder, sharper. She gave you that name years ago? Claire asked. Yes, 5, maybe 6 years ago, Daniel said, not understanding why she was fixated on it. Claire's mind raced. Mrs. Hartini had prepared a false identity for her years before Daniel ever met her. Daniel thought he had chosen Claire at random in a cafe, but what if he hadn't? What if their meeting wasn't an accident at all? What if somehow Mrs. Hartini already knew who Claire was? The realization hit her like ice water. She wasn't just a new target. She wasn't just the wife of an accomplice. Somehow, she was part of Mrs. Hartini's past, and Daniel had unknowingly dragged her straight back into the spider's web. Daniel expected Claire to scream or cry or demand to know where he had hidden the keys, but she didn't. Claire did none of those things. She simply stood frozen in the middle of the study. Her eyes stared blankly at the fake passport on the floor. That name, Sarah Williams. It echoed inside her head, unlocking doors in her mind that had been sealed for years. Daniel mistook her silence for shock. This wasn't shock. It was the horror of a realization just coming into focus. Claire, Daniel repeated tensely, tell me where the notebook is. He stepped toward her. Don't touch me, Claire whispered, so softly Daniel almost didn't hear it. We don't have time. The name, Claire cut him off. Her eyes slowly lifted to meet his. Her gaze was so sharp that Daniel stopped moving. Sarah Williams. Why did she give you that name? Daniel snapped, his frustration peaking. It was just a random name, maybe one of the orphanage kids from years ago. What does it matter? What does it matter? Claire repeated, her voice trembling. Because that name isn't random. It's my real name. The room fell silent. Even Daniel's breathing stopped. He stared at her, total confusion on his face. What? What are you talking about? My real name isn't Claire, Claire said quietly. Claire Rahayu is the name my adoptive parents gave me. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from sharp flashes of memory. Before I was adopted, I lived in an orphanage, only for a short time. I don't remember much. I only remember my name. They called me Sarah. Daniel took a step back, as if she had just struck him. His face turned pale. No, that's not possible. I was at Loving Grace Orphanage, Claire continued. The puzzle pieces were snapping together at a terrifying speed. I was there until I was 5. Then a family from another city adopted me. They gave me a new name. They moved me away. They wanted me to start a new life. Daniel leaned against the wall. He looked sick. Loving Grace, he repeated faintly. I didn't recognize you. I arrived there when I was 10. You must have already been gone. Of course you didn't recognize me, Claire said. A bitter laugh escaped her throat. I was a ghost, a bedtime story, the child who got away. Now everything makes sense. Oh, God, everything makes sense. Their meeting at the cafe. Daniel thought it was a coincidence. He thought he had found Claire, but that was a lie. She knew, Claire whispered, staring at him with a mix of horror and pity. Mrs. Hartley knew I was Sarah Williams. She never lost me. She's been watching me this whole time. Daniel shook his head, refusing to believe it. No, that's not possible. She knew I was Sarah Williams. She knew you'd lead me right back to her. She gave me that name, Daniel murmured, his thoughts unraveling. Sarah Williams. Years ago she told me to memorize it. It was a trap. She knew one day I'd use it for you. She knew, Claire finished. She knew you'd try to protect me. And she gave you the tool to do it. A tool that also confirmed who I really was. Claire walked to the pile of passports on the floor. She picked up the fake one. Her photo. Sarah Williams. At last she understood why she had always felt watched, why something had always felt wrong. Even in her seemingly perfect marriage, Mrs. Hartley had never let her go. She was an escaped investment, and the boss did not like losing assets. The suitcase, the dolls, they weren't just trophies, they were warnings. And the doll with her face wasn't preparation, it was a declaration of ownership. You are mine, and you will come back. She doesn't just want the notebook, Claire said. Her voice was cold now, steady with resolve. She wants me, too. The notebook is a bonus. I'm the real prize. Daniel stared at his wife, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who turned out to be the key to everything. Fear drained from him, replaced with something else. Rage, deep, burning rage at the woman who destroyed his life. She's not going to debt you, Daniel said quietly. She'll get both of us if we just stand here, Claire replied. We have to use the notebook. We have to draw her out. We can't fight her directly. She has people. She's just an old woman hiding behind her reputation. She thinks she's untouchable. We're going to touch her. Claire took her phone from Daniel's pocket. He didn't stop her. She took Daniel's phone as well and threw it against the wall. The screen shattered into pieces. No tracker, Claire said calmly. Only my phone. She looked straight at Daniel. You said you set the stage for Laura, Claire said quietly. Now help me set the stage for Mrs. Hartley. The moment Claire said that, the landline phone in the study rang. The sound was sharp, shrill, and demanding in the silent room. Neither Claire nor Daniel ever used the house phone. It existed only for the internet package. They both stared at it, as if it were a venomous snake. The phone rang again, and again. Daniel looked at Claire. Claire nodded slowly. With trembling hands, Daniel lifted the receiver. He didn't say a word. Silence on the other end. Then a voice spoke. A soft, motherly voice, gentle and laced with disappointment. Mrs. Hartley's voice. Daniel, my child, she said, her voice like cold velvet. I am disappointed. This little game of hide and seek is very immature. I know you have my notebook, and I know Sarah is with you. Daniel's heart seemed to stop. She knew. She knew Claire's real name. Playtime is over, the voice continued calmly. Bring Sarah home to me, and bring my notebook, now. Or the suitcase won't be the only thing sinking in the river tonight. I will send people to pick you both up, and they will not be as gentle as I am. The line went dead. The click of the phone hanging up sounded louder than an explosion. Daniel stood frozen, still holding the receiver. His hand was stiff. He stared at Claire, eyes wide with terror. She knows. She knows your real name. She called you Sarah. She's going to send people. Of course, Claire said. She refused to let panic take over. Strangely, now that everything was exposed, part of her felt calm. Her enemy had a name, her enemy had a face, and her enemy had just made a mistake. She thinks I'm still a frightened victim, Claire continued. She won't send anyone here. It's too messy, too many traces. She'll make us come to her. She said she'd send people, Daniel protested. That's a bluff, Claire cut in, to scare us into running. And if we run, her people will catch us on the road. She controls the narrative. No, we're not running. We're going to her on our terms. Claire walked to the downstairs bathroom where she had hidden the notebook. Daniel followed her like a shadow. Claire opened a box of sanitary pads and pulled out a plastic bag containing the notebook. It felt heavy in her hands, heavy with the lives written inside it. She handed it to Daniel. You carry it. When she sees us, she has to see you holding it. That's what she wants. Daniel stared at the notebook as if it were a bomb. Then what? Then you give it to her, and while she's distracted, I take care of the rest. Take care of the rest, Daniel hissed. Claire, this is Mrs. Hartley. She's surrounded by guards. And you're her son, Claire said sharply. She won't expect anything from you except fear. Use that. Claire took out her phone. Battery, 70%. Enough. She turned on voice recording and switched the phone to silent mode. Then she slipped it into the pocket of her dress, hidden beneath the folds of fabric. Invisible. Where are we going? Daniel asked. She didn't say. She doesn't have to, Claire replied. There's only one place poetic enough for her, the place where she thinks everything began and ends. We're going to the bridge. Daniel swallowed hard. The bridge where he had dumped the suitcase. Let's go, Claire said, grabbing her black shawl from the hook by the door. Then she stopped him. Daniel, for all these years, you've been my husband. I don't know how much of you was real, but if any part of you was, if your love was real, prove it now. Daniel looked into Claire's eyes. He saw fear, but he also saw a strength he never knew she possessed. He nodded. He slipped the notebook into the inner pocket of his jacket. He walked into the kitchen and reached for the knife block, the largest butcher knife. Don't, Claire said. Too obvious. She'll search you. Daniel hesitated, then put it back. She was right. Claire was thinking clearly. He wasn't. I have this, Daniel said, opening a drawer in the study. He pulled out something small, a compact folding box cutter he used to open packages. This always gets past inspections. Claire nodded. Put it in your shoe. They walked out the front door, not sneaking. They walked like a married couple going out for a late-night drive. They got into Daniel's car. Daniel drove. The ride to the bridge felt endless. No one spoke. Claire focused on her breathing. She repeated the plan in her head. She had to make her talk. She had to make her confess. The recording was their only chance, if they survived. Daniel drove rigidly. Both hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He was driving toward the woman who raised him, either to betray her or to be killed by her. He didn't know which would come first. They arrived at the park near the river. The park lights illuminated the pathway. Empty. No other cars. She's there, Daniel whispered. Claire looked toward the bridge. In the middle of the wooden bridge stood 3 figures. One small and slender figure, flanked by 2 large, solid ones, like a queen and her fortresses. Mrs. Hartley. Daniel parked the car and shut off the engine. The night's silence closed in around them. Claire, Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. If we don't succeed, we succeed, Claire said firmly. She took his hand. It was ice cold. One step at a time. Remember, you're angry. You're angry because she lied to you about me. Use it. Daniel looked at Claire, then nodded. The anger was there. It was real. They walked out the front door, not sneaking. They walked like a married couple going out for a late-night drive. They got into Daniel's car. Daniel drove. The ride to the bridge felt endless. No one spoke. Claire focused on her breathing. She repeated the plan in her head. She had to make her talk. She had to make her confess. The recording was their only chance, if they survived. Daniel drove rigidly. Both hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He was driving toward the woman who raised him, either to betray her or to be killed by her. He didn't know which would come first. They arrived at the park near the river. The park lights illuminated the pathway. Empty, no other cars. "She's there," Daniel whispered. Claire looked toward the bridge. In the middle of the wooden bridge stood 3 figures. One small and slender figure flanked by 2 large, solid ones, like a queen and her fortresses. Mrs. Hartley. Daniel parked the car and shut off the engine. The night's silence closed in around them. "Claire," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "If we don't succeed, we succeed," Claire said firmly. She took his hand. It was ice cold. "One step at a time. Remember, you're angry. You're angry because she lied to you about me. Use it." Daniel looked at Claire, then nodded. The anger was there. It was real. They walked out the front door, not sneaking. They walked like a married couple going out for a late-night drive. They got into Daniel's car. Daniel drove. The ride to the bridge felt endless. No one spoke. Claire focused on her breathing. She repeated the plan in her head. She had to make her talk. She had to make her confess. The recording was their only chance, if they survived. Daniel drove rigidly. Both hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He was driving toward the woman who raised him, either to betray her or to be killed by her. He didn't know which would come first. They arrived at the park near the river. The park lights illuminated the pathway. Empty, no other cars. "She's there," Daniel whispered. Claire looked toward the bridge. In the middle of the wooden bridge stood 3 figures. One small and slender figure flanked by 2 large, solid ones, like a queen and her fortresses. Mrs. Hartley. Daniel parked the car and shut off the engine. The night's silence closed in around them. "Claire," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "If we don't succeed, we succeed," Claire said firmly. She took his hand. It was ice cold. "One step at a time. Remember, you're angry. You're angry because she lied to you about me. Use it." Daniel looked at Claire, then nodded. The anger was there. It was real.
"I was the one who arranged your so-called chance meeting," Mrs. Hartini continued, clearly savoring the moment. "His love for you was my creation, just like I created his career, just like I created Laura's death, and just like I will create the deaths of both of you." Daniel trembled. The truth was too heavy. The only real thing in his life had been the greatest lie of all. "Enough," Mrs. Hartini said. Her smile faded. "The book, Daniel, now." Daniel, moving like a robot, reached into the pocket of his jacket. He pulled out the black notebook. He held it out. Mrs. Hartini extended her thin hand to take it. Her face was filled with triumph. That was when Claire acted. She didn't attack Mrs. Hartini. She screamed, "Daniel, no!" and threw herself at him, as if trying to stop him from handing over the book. It was a distraction. As she crashed into Daniel, she whispered quickly, "Police! Bluff! Now!" Mrs. Hartini was startled by Claire's sudden movement. The guards stepped forward. Broken and furious, Daniel understood Claire's intent. This was their final gamble. He no longer cared whether he lived or died. He shoved Claire behind him, away from the guards. He did not give up the book. Instead, he hurled it far away, into the river in the opposite direction. "No!" Mrs. Hartini screamed. It was no longer the voice of a gentle mother. It was a scream of pure rage. As the guards instinctively turned toward the flying book, Daniel shouted at the top of his lungs, "Police! They've surrounded us!" Chaos exploded on the bridge. Daniel's shout, "Police!" echoed through the night air, shattering the silence. It was a bluff, a desperate lie, but in that moment, it worked. The two trained guards froze for a split second. They looked toward the path, searching for flashing sirens, for a new threat. At the same time, their eyes followed the black notebook as it spun through the air before landing with a soft splash in the rushing water below. The book was gone, swallowed by darkness. "No!" Hartini's scream was no longer human. It was the shriek of a wounded beast. Her calm maternal mask completely fell away, replaced by pure hatred. Her dark, lifeless eyes locked onto the spot where the book had disappeared. All records of her crimes, her fortune, the names of her victims, gone. "You fool! You idiot, Daniel!" she screamed, her voice breaking. That was when the guards snapped out of it. They ignored the police bluff and focused on the threat in front of them. The bluff had bought Claire and Daniel only 1 second. "Run, Claire!" He shoved her hard toward the base of the bridge, but Claire knew she couldn't outrun them. She stumbled, and that was when the first guard lunged at Daniel. The second, larger guard ignored Daniel and chased after Claire. He knew who the weaker target was. Daniel saw it. He was an accountant, not a fighter, but tonight he was a man with nothing left. His life, his love, his past, all lies designed by the woman on the bridge. He roared, not like an accountant, but like a desperate man. He ignored the first guard charging him and pivoted, slanting his shoulder hard into the knee of the second guard chasing Claire. It was a brutal collision. The guard staggered, shocked by the resistance, giving Claire 1 more second. Claire didn't run. She reached into her pocket, making sure her phone was still recording. Still recording. The first guard had recovered and grabbed Daniel from behind, choking him. Daniel struggled, his legs kicking wildly. He reached into his shoe and pulled out the small box cutter he had hidden. He swung it back blindly. He felt it sink into the arm gripping him. The guard screamed and released him. Daniel spun around, gasping. In front of him stood 2 injured and furious guards. He held the small cutter out in front of him. It was a pathetic sight, a tiny blade against 2 trained men. "Daniel," Claire whispered in horror. "Go!" Daniel shouted at her. His eyes never left the guards. But Claire couldn't leave. She couldn't abandon him. Mrs. Hartini watched everything with narrowed eyes. Her book was gone, her plan was ruined, her favorite child had betrayed her, and Sarah was still standing. "You think this is over?" she hissed. She was no longer shouting. Her voice was calm again, a deadly calm. "This isn't over until I say it's over." She reached into her elegant handbag. She didn't pull out a phone. She pulled out something small, black, glinting under the bridge lights. A gun. A small handgun that fit perfectly in her thin hand. The guards saw it and stepped back, making way for their queen. Daniel's eyes widened. "No, Mother, please!" "Don't call me mother," Hartini snapped. "You are no longer my son. You are a failure, just like the others." She raised the gun. She didn't aim it at Daniel. Daniel was already broken. She aimed straight at Claire. "You," Hartini said, stepping toward her. "Sarah Williams, my little ghost, the child who ran away. I should never have let you be adopted. I should have drowned you in this river when I had the chance." Claire stepped back. Her heart felt like it stopped. She could feel the recording still running. She had to make her talk, but no sound came out. "You took everything from me," Hartini continued, her voice like a serpent's hiss. "You came back. You poisoned Daniel. You stole my book." "Not her!" Daniel shouted, standing between the injured guards still fighting. "It was me! I took it! I threw it away! Kill me! Let her go!" Mrs. Hartini turned to Daniel. A thin, terrifying smile spread across her lips. "Oh, Daniel, you still don't understand. Killing you isn't a punishment, it's a gift. The real punishment is making you watch her die first." She aimed the gun back at Claire, who was now cornered against the bridge railing, her back pressed against the cold wood. Time slowed. Claire saw Hartini's thin, wrinkled finger begin to squeeze the trigger. Daniel saw it. The guard saw it. Claire closed her eyes, clutching the phone in her pocket. Bang! The gunshot shattered the night, echoing through the trees and across the water. Claire opened her eyes. She felt no pain. She was still standing. In front of her stood Daniel, his back to her, his shoulders slumped. He had done it. When Hartini looked back at Claire, Daniel used that fraction of a second. He lunged forward, not to attack Hartini, but to stand in front of Claire. He used his own body as a shield. Daniel looked at Claire, his eyes wide with shock. Then he looked down. A small, neat hole, surrounded by rapidly spreading red, appeared in the center of his shirt. He had been shot in the back. The bullet had exited through his chest. "Daniel," Claire whispered, reaching for him. Daniel coughed. Blood spilled from his lips. He smiled, a strange, bloody smile, but it was Daniel's real smile, the smile Claire knew. "She didn't get you," he whispered. Then his knees buckled and he collapsed forward. "No! Daniel!" Claire screamed, catching her husband's falling body. She dropped to her knees, holding him. Mrs. Hartini stared at the scene. The gun was still smoking in her hand. She had just killed her favorite child. Her expression was empty. Then, in the distance, another sound rose. This time, it wasn't a bluff. Sirens, real sirens, growing closer. The gunshot had alerted someone, a police patrol near the residential area. Red and blue lights flashed at the end of the road. The guards looked at each other. It was over. They hadn't been paid to deal with the police. They turned and ran into the forest. Mrs. Hartini was left alone. She stared at the approaching police. She stared at Claire crying over Daniel's body. She stared at the gun in her hand. She had nothing left. Her book was gone. Her money was gone. Her children were dead or had betrayed her. "You," she hissed at Claire. She raised the gun again. She didn't care about the police. She would finish what she started. She staggered forward, aiming the gun at Claire's bowed head. Claire looked up, her eyes filled with tears and hatred. As Hartini stepped, she didn't notice where she was standing. She stumbled. Maybe on Daniel's blood, maybe her old legs could no longer carry her hatred. She tripped right at the edge of the bridge, the same low railing where Daniel had thrown the suitcase. Her balance gave way. She flailed. The gun slipped from her hand and fell into the river. She reached for Claire. Her claw-like fingers scratched the air just inches from Claire's face. Her eyes widened in terror as gravity took over. "No!" Her final scream was cut off by a loud splash, the exact same sound as the suitcase Daniel had dropped. Mrs. Hartini disappeared beneath the dark, rushing water. The same river she had used as her secret dumping ground had claimed her. Karma had collected its debt. Moments later, police lights flooded the bridge. Claire knelt alone in a pool of blood, holding her husband's lifeless body. In her pocket, her phone was still recording, capturing the sound of approaching sirens. The lights were blinding, red, blue, white, spinning in a haze around her. Voices sounded distant. Men in uniform shouted orders, but Claire didn't hear them. She sat on the cold asphalt, wrapped in an itchy ambulance blanket. She felt no cold. She felt nothing. Daniel's body was covered with a white sheet. The bridge was now a crime scene, taped off with police lines. "Ma'am?" A gentle female officer crouched in front of her. "Mrs. Claire, can you tell us what happened?" Claire looked at her. How could she put into words murder, betrayal, love, lies? She didn't need to. Her hands trembling, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was still on, showing a recording time of 24 minutes and 35 seconds. She pressed stop, saved the file. Then she handed the phone to the officer. "Listen," Claire whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's all there. Mrs. Hartini. Everything." The officer took the phone, and that was when hell broke loose. The recording was the key that opened Pandora's box. Mrs. Hartini's clear confession about Laura, about Karina, about Daniel, about decades of manipulation was an atomic bomb. Irrefutable evidence. Hours later, as dawn broke, divers found the small handgun at the bottom of the river. They didn't find Mrs. Hartini, not yet. Claire was taken to the hospital, examined, then brought to the police station. She told everything. This time the words flowed. She told them about the night Daniel threw the suitcase away. "The suitcase?" the lead detective asked. "In the shed," Claire said, "still there, behind the fertilizer sacks." SWAT raided the shed at Claire's house. They found it, the large black suitcase. When they opened it, even the toughest officers felt sick. Dozens of porcelain dolls with mutilated faces, photos of Claire, and in the lower compartment, stacks of cash, hundreds of millions, soaked and partially moldy. It was a miniature graveyard, physical proof to support Claire's audio recording. The news exploded. The scandal of Mother's Love Orphanage. Mrs. Hartini's saintly face was on every front page, now displayed beside photos of young women who had died in accidents. Laura, Karina, Bella, Rihanna Hall, dozens more. Her criminal network was exposed. Driven by undeniable evidence, police began arresting her accomplices, paid mechanics, other accountants, and, of course, the 2 guards who had fled. They were caught 2 days later trying to leave the country. Mrs. Hartini's body was found a week later, miles downstream, caught in a dam. Her once respected face was bloated and destroyed by water. No one came to claim her body. She received an ironic burial, forgotten at the bottom of the river, just as she had forgotten her victims. Daniel's funeral was different. It was quiet, but he was not forgotten. Only Claire attended. She stood before a simple headstone, wearing a black shawl. She didn't know what she was supposed to feel. This man had lied to her from the beginning. Their meeting had been engineered. But his love in his final moments, that love felt real. His sacrifice was real. She didn't mourn the monster or the accomplice. She mourned the man she thought she married and the man who chose to die for her. It was a complicated grief, a grief she would carry forever. Claire sold the house. She couldn't bear to live there, sleeping in the room where Daniel once lay beside her, or passing the study where the phone had first rung. She sold everything inside. She didn't want a single cent of Daniel's money. It was blood money. The cash from the suitcase was seized by the state and used as compensation funds for the victims' families. Claire returned to using the name Claire Rahayu, the name given by her adoptive parents, but she also accepted her past. She was Sarah Williams. She was both. She was a survivor. Months later, Mother's Love Orphanage was shut down. The building was demolished. The scandal was so massive, it changed how the government monitored orphanages forever. Using the inheritance left by her adoptive parents, Claire started a foundation, a small but vital one. She named it the Laura Light Foundation. It didn't just help orphaned children get education, it gave them legal counsel, helped them trace inheritances, and protected them from predators like Mrs. Hartini. She used her trauma to build a shield for others. 1 year after the bloody night on the bridge, Claire stood not by a river, but by the sea. She watched the sunrise, a new dawn. The sea air felt clean. She no longer felt watched. She no longer was afraid of her own shadow. She had faced her monsters, both outside and within her heart. Her past was part of her, but it no longer defined her. She was free, no longer a porcelain doll in someone else's collection. She was Claire, and her story was only just beginning.